I was mentioning the weather earlier, and other than Saturday, it's pretty dismal. Now, Saturday, we're having an opportunity for you to get out. If you want a nice drive on a nice sunny day, and it's going to be in the 60s, community yard sale begins at 7 o'clock in the morning at the Twin Falls County Fairgrounds. So you can get out and at least enjoy Saturday if you have the day off. But after that, the weather goes south again, and it's going to be south for quite a while. Lots of rain and clouds and not very warm over the next week to 10 days. Weather is service, of course, of Mountain Home Auto Ranch in Mountain Home. And I do want to mention, I got a bill yesterday from Idaho Power, which I haven't had to, at least in my case, turn on the furnace. I haven't had AC or furnace on now for well over a month, but some people out there who have bigger properties perhaps have things working overtime, and that furnace has been working a great deal. It might need some service now. You need to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. They'll come out and they'll get the job done right, and they'll get it done right the first time. Problem-free cozy winners are found at Ramsey Heating and Electric, 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. The telephone number is 678-0459. Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Telephone number for reaching our program today, 736-0300, 736-0300. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Thank you for taking my call. I do appreciate it.
Sure.
You know, I listened to you just a little bit ago when you were talking about how athletes didn't want to go to the White House. Well, here's my take on it. I wouldn't, and I mean this from the heart, I would not walk across the street to shake Obama's hand. He's a disgusting man. I totally disagree with him. I would not walk across the street to shake Bill Clinton's hand, because he's a disgusting human being. It has nothing to do with him being president. He's just disgusting people. Now, John Kennedy, I'd crawl on glass to meet that man. So it ain't because they're Democrats. It ain't because they're none of that. It's just they have nothing to offer to talk to me, and I don't have to talk to that kind of person. Now, Trump, I'd love to meet Trump. I'd like to do it, mainly not that I agree with everything. I'd like to talk to him, just to talk man to man, have a beer, little beer summit like Obama did with those cops that he embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know, just something like that would be great. But no, just because they're president, that doesn't mean they deserve to have their hand shook. Because all they are is American, just like you and myself.
Well, I think that's well said. And a few years ago, when the Boston Bruins won the Stanley Cup, well, I guess it's been more than a few years ago now, 2009. They had a goaltender named Tim Thomas, and Tim Thomas was an American, and more hockey players are American-born than when I was a kid. I think they were like one or two playing in the NHL. Now a lot of them, but Tim Thomas was a kid, I believe, from Minnesota, but he came from a staunch conservative Republican family, and the team got invited to the White House, and he refused to go. And he'd had a stellar year, and he'd come up from the minors, and he was just at the top of his game. The liberals in Boston, and that's the problem because of where he was playing, the liberals in Boston were so incensed that they demanded that he be forced to say, "I'm sorry." And then he wouldn't say, "I'm sorry." And not long after that, the Bruins let him go. Thanks for winning the title for us, but since you didn't bow before our Lord and Savior, Barack Hussein Obama, you must leave. And it ruined his career. He never caught on with anybody else afterward. Tom Brady didn't go yesterday, but he didn't go 2 years ago. And of course, he'd been off the team for a number of years, but one former Patriot tight end was unable to go because he was spending his first day in hell. 927, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 49. Aaron Hernandez, is one of the greatest wastes, not just in sports history, but really in American history. I don't know if you know his history, but he was growing up as a kid in Bristol, Connecticut, and his dad died. His dad died when Hernandez was about 13 years old, and up until that point, he'd been a bright, cheery kid, and everybody knew he was going to be a great athlete, but he didn't have an attitude. He got along well with other people. You may know this from your own time in school. Sometimes some of the best athletes weren't the nicest people around school, but sometimes they were. They were, I wouldn't say Aaron Hernandez was like Tim Tebow, but he was considered to be a pretty nice kid around town. His dad died, and he became embittered. And then without his dad's guidance, he ended up running with the wrong crowd. and they would smoke crack and PCP and break into houses and commit crimes. By the time he got to college, within his first month at college, he cracked somebody over the head with a beer bottle. And there was always rumors going around that he might have been involved in a killing in Miami when he was playing college football. So he gets to the NFL, and he got bypassed in the first round. He wasn't drafted to the fourth round because he scored the lowest ever on the NFL's character test that anybody had ever scored before. He gets to the NFL, though, and he is just spectacular on the field. This guy could have made millions of dollars had he kept his nose clean, and millions of dollars playing football and in endorsements, and instead he has to go out and start killing people over petty things. And then when we hear that he ends up hanging himself in his prison cell, his agent and his lawyer say, "Well, no, that couldn't possibly have happened." I don't know about that. He wrote John 3:16 across his forehead. Do you think a little late in life, he'd been just acquitted last week on some other murder charges in an unrelated case to the first case? But do you think that he might have gone back to prison and it suddenly dawned on him, I've been here 2 years and I'm never going to get out, despite the fact that I had a little success last week in court? And that maybe he finally started doing some soul searching, and in that moment before the end of his life, suddenly realized he'd thrown it all away. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 50. That might be about as good as we're going to do today. We're at 50 for the moment on Top Story. We're talking a little bit about the Patriots and celebration yesterday for the Super Bowl champs at the White House with President Trump. Apparently, if you're a Patriots fan, you're a white supremacist. Coming up on 9:34, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 52. A National Review has this today. During Super Bowl 51 back in February, gosh, is that long ago? Well, the weather was the same. With the New England Patriots down early to the Falcons, alt-right celebrity Richard Spencer tweeted that he was rooting for the Patriots. He lives half the year in Whitefish, just in case you didn't know that. And he's the fellow who claims he invented the name alt-right. I don't know that he's a celebrity. Most of you probably have never heard of him. But he explained his pick. Number one, Belichick and Brady support Trump. Number two, 3 white wide receivers. Number 3, consistently NFL's whitest team. Number 4, Atlanta is dreadful. The writer Ian Tuttle at the National Review says this week the Patriots, who won the game in dramatic come-from-behind fashion, visited the White House, prompting a piece in Politico magazine entitled, "The Alt-Right's Favorite Team Visits the White House." Well, it's also the favorite team of every liberal in New England, and there are a lot of liberals there, trust me. It turns out that if writer Ben Strauss's roster survey is accurate, the Patriots are not, in fact, the NFL's whitest team, and that Spencer was wrong, to which the only appropriate response is the one that should have greeted Spencer's tweets, "Who in God's rainbow-colored world cares?" And then the writer goes on to say, "The salient question for journalists should be, so what? What should be drawn from the fact that a white supremacist has strong opinions about football teams or avant-garde jazz or the South Beach diet or the Star Wars prequels? What happens when we discover that David Duke's favorite vegetable is kale?" In fact, I had somebody tell me, one of our area Republicans said that if you look at what David Duke says, you might agree with 50% of it, but you can't say you agree with 50% of it because then people say, "Aha, he agrees with David Duke and we know what he's all about." How many liberals out there agree with what Karl Marx said? Do you want to be associated? Well, I suppose in this day and age they do. Well, I only agreed with 50% of it. Good. When you're running the next time, we're going to make sure that we inform people that you're on the same page with Karl Marx. We'll just leave that other little part out of that. But this shows you the fact that you've got a coach and a star quarterback who were Trump supporters and quite public about it last year. Media doesn't like this football team any longer. No, I have a lot of reasons why I don't like the Patriots. Number one, they have a history of thrashing my team twice a year. And one of my two favorite teams twice a year. And I've grown to the point where I just grit my teeth. But here's the thing. If you want to beat them, then you got to be better than they are. And for the most part, over the last 15 years, very few teams have been. And it's not their fault that they're good and they keep winning. But according to liberals, because you have some people on the team who are prominent, and not all of them, but some people on the team who are prominent, and they back Trump, then therefore nobody should like them. And number two, now there's more reason not to like them because a guy, and this Spencer character from up in Whitefish, he is not, while he says he's a white, I don't even know that he describes himself as a white supremacist. What he has said is that he thinks people who aren't white Christian Americans should leave the country. But when questioned about if they should be forced to leave the country, he doesn't say that. He essentially he has no desire to put people in camps. But I think his belief is that we would all be just better off if they would all convert to Christianity and then share in that Christian culture that's been handed down to us. I don't know that he had. I don't know that his proposal would work. Although remember, Mitt Romney was mocked for saying that we should have illegal immigrants self-deport. It was mocked by people on both the left and the right. But lo and behold, a lot of them have self-deported over the course of the last several months. But I don't think Spencer is going to win on that count, and I don't think he's going to win many converts. But just because he likes the Patriots doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who's a Patriots fan thinks like he does. And yet, here you go. You've got people in mainstream media who are trying to build that association. And again, we ask ourselves, are they being objective journalists, or is this more fake news and more of an attempt to try to steer the way you think so that you'll think like they do? And I think the answer there is quite obvious. They want you to think like they do, and they want you to get on board with all of their bizarre ideas that grown men who think they are little girls should go in and shower in the same locker room at the public pool with your 3-year-old daughter. And if you don't get on board with that, you're somehow a bad human being. Bill Colley, from your standpoint, what do you think is worse? Some guy who's a bit of a wacko bird up in Whitefish, who's a Patriots fan, or some guy who's going into the toilet so he can stand next to your daughter while she's doing her business? I think most people understand that, and this is where Democrats haven't quite picked up on yet that it wasn't fake news. It wasn't the Russians, and it wasn't Martians. They lost because most of their views make mainstream America vomit. 20 more minutes left to Bill Colley on Top Story today. Oh, and the Environmentalist. Got to make a mention of them if I can in the next couple of minutes, too, as well. I won't get to it today by the looks of things, but saw a great piece today on skee ball and how it still survives in the modern technological age. Maybe on a day when we have a couple of lighter topics, I can get to that one.